Let's get right into it. Number 10, Pillage. Imagine your army just captured a city and your first thought isn't secure the perimeter. It's, ooh, free televisions. Congratulations, you've just committed one of the oldest war crimes in the book. Pillage, also known as looting, is stealing property during armed conflict for private gain, and humanity has been doing it for so long that banning it required multiple international treaties. The Hague Regulations of 1907 flat out state that pillage is formally forbidden. The Fourth Geneva Convention repeats it, and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court lists it again, because apparently some lessons need to be written down 3 separate times. Here's the part people get wrong: not all taking is pillage. Armies are actually allowed to seize certain things: enemy military equipment, weapons, supplies with genuine military use. That's called war booty, which sounds like a pirate-themed workout class, but is a real legal term. The crime kicks in when soldiers start grabbing property for themselves. Your rifle? Fair game. Grandma's jewelry box? War crime. The line is basically, is this for the war effort or is this for your suitcase? And this isn't ancient history. The ICC has prosecuted pillage in modern conflicts, and international tribunals treated organized looting during the wars in the former Yugoslavia as serious criminal conduct. Because when an army strips a town down to the light fixtures, that's not a souvenir run, that's systematic theft from people who just lost everything else. The genuinely dark twist is that pillage often isn't chaos, it's policy. Some armed groups historically paid their fighters in permission to loot, which turned robbery into a recruitment perk. International law had to step in and say the quiet part loudly. War is not a shopping spree, and I was there anyway is not a receipt. Number 9, Perfidy. Here's a fun paradox. In war, you're allowed to lie, just not in certain very specific ways. Camouflage, legal. Fake radio chatter, legal. Inflatable decoy tanks that look like bouncy castles with turrets, completely legal, and armies have genuinely used them. Those are called ruses of war, and international law is fine with them. But there's one category of deception that crosses the line, and it's called perfidy. Perfidy means winning your enemy's trust in the protections of the law itself, and then killing them with it. Additional protocol, one of the Geneva Convention spells out the classics: pretending to surrender with a white flag and then opening fire, faking being wounded to lure medics close, dressing as a civilian to get near enemy soldiers, and the big one, misusing the Red Cross or Red Crescent emblem like painting it on a vehicle full of armed troops. Why is this treated as worse than regular battlefield trickery? Because it poisons the well for everyone. The white flag only works if both sides believe it. The moment one army fakes a surrender, every future surrender becomes a coin flip, and soldiers who genuinely want to give up get shot by an enemy who's been burned before. Perfidy doesn't just kill the people in front of you, it quietly deletes the emergency exits from war itself. That's the genuinely clever, horrible logic of it. The crime isn't the lie, it's which lie. Lie about where your tanks are, and that's Tuesday. Lie about the symbols that exist to keep wounded people and medics alive, and you've sawed through the branch every soldier on earth is sitting on. International law essentially says, deceive your enemy all you want, but the ambulance is off limits, and so is the white flag. Break that, and you're not a strategist. You're the reason nobody can have nice things, including mercy. Number 8, no quarter. Some war crimes happen in the chaos of battle. This one happens in a sentence. Take no prisoners sounds like tough guy movie dialogue, but if a real commander actually orders it, they've committed a war crime before a single shot is fired. It's called declaring no quarter, announcing that there will be no survivors, that surrender will not be accepted. And it's been explicitly banned since the Hague Regulations of 1907. The Rome Statute lists it too. And here's the detail that surprises people. The declaration itself is the crime. You don't have to follow through. Just ordering it, just threatening the enemy that surrender is pointless is enough. Why so strict? Because of what the threat does. A soldier who can surrender might drop his weapon when the battle is lost. A soldier who's been told he'll be killed either way will fight to the last bullet. Because why wouldn't he? No quarter doesn't just doom the losing side. It makes every battle longer, bloodier, and more desperate for everyone, including the side that declared it. It's the military equivalent of removing the brakes from your own car to intimidate traffic. The rule protects one of the oldest deals in warfare. An enemy who is hors de combat, French for out of the fight, must be spared. Wounded, surrendering, parachuting from a destroyed aircraft. Once someone is out of the fight, killing them stops being combat and starts being murder with extra steps. And that's the strange dignity buried inside the laws of war. They accept that people will kill each other, but they insist the killing must be able to end. Surrender is the off switch. A commander who declares no quarter isn't being ruthless or efficient. He's ripping the off switch out of the wall and calling it strategy. International law calls it something shorter, a crime. Number 7. Forbidden weapons war has rules about how you're allowed to kill people, which sounds absurd until you see what happens without them. The core principle comes from the Hague Regulations and Additional Protocol 1. Weapons that cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering are banned. Translation: if a weapon's main selling point is not stopping the enemy but maximizing agony, it's illegal. The list is grimly specific: expanding bullets, rounds designed to mushroom inside the body and tear wounds far beyond what's needed to take a soldier out of the fight, banned since the Hague Declaration of 1899. Poison and poison weapons, banned. Chemical weapons like mustard gas and nerve agents, banned by the Geneva Protocol of 1925 after World War I, gave everyone a preview, and banned harder by the Chemical Weapons Convention of 1993. Biological weapons, banned by the Biological Weapons Convention of 1972. Blinding laser weapons, and yes, this one is real. Banned by a 1995 protocol before they were ever widely deployed, which might be the single most proactive thing humanity has ever done. Weapons designed to injure with fragments that can't be detected by X-rays, banned because the entire point of glass shrapnel is that surgeons can't find it. Notice the pattern. None of these bans are about being polite. They're about a cold calculation written into law. War's purpose is to defeat the enemy, not to torture him on the way down. A regular bullet stops a soldier, an expanding bullet stops him and guarantees the field hospital can't save him. That second part is the crime. Here's the punchline nobody enjoys. The reason we know these weapons needed banning is that every single one of them was used first. The laws of war are basically humanity's regret written in legal language. Each treaty is a receipt for something we did, looked at, and said, okay, even by our standards, that was too far. Number 6, human shields. Every rule of war rests on one big idea. Fighters and civilians are different categories, and the fighting is supposed to stay in category 1. Human shielding is what happens when someone weaponizes that idea against itself. It means deliberately placing civilians or prisoners of war in front of military targets so the enemy can't attack without killing protected people. Your ammunition depot keeps getting bombed, park it next to an apartment block, your command post is exposed. Move it into a school. The civilians become the armor. This is explicitly banned. The Fourth Geneva Convention prohibits using protected persons to render areas immune from military operations. Additional Protocol 1 says the presence of civilians shall not be used to shield military objectives, and the Rome Statute lists using human shields as a war crime, full stop. Here's what makes it uniquely cynical. It's a crime that only works because the other side has morals. A human shield is useless against an enemy willing to slaughter civilians. The tactic literally depends on your opponent being more decent than you are. It's the only war crime that runs on borrowed conscience. You're not defeating the enemy's army. You're taking their ethics hostage. And there's a nasty legal twist on the other side too. An attacker facing human shields isn't automatically free to fire away and blame the defender. The attacker still has to weigh civilian harm against military advantage. The shield's presence doesn't switch off their protection. So both sides end up locked in a horrible math problem that one side created on purpose, using people who never agreed to be part of the equation. The law's verdict is blunt. Civilians are not sandbags. Anyone who uses them as sandbags has committed a crime, regardless of what the enemy does next. Number 5, attacking hospitals. There's a reason the Red Cross symbol is one of the most recognized images on Earth. It's supposed to mean not a target in every language at once. Hospitals, ambulances, medical staff, and the wounded they treat hold some of the strongest protection in the entire law of war. The first Geneva Convention, the original one from 1864, updated in 1949, exists almost entirely for this. Attacking medical units that are doing their job isn't just a violation. It's an attack on the one piece of mercy that war officially agreed to keep. The logic is older than the treaties. A wounded soldier is out of the fight. Remember hors de combat from earlier? So shelling the building where he's being stitched up achieves nothing military. You're not weakening an army, you're just killing patients and the people trying to save them, some of whom might even be your own wounded because medical ethics under the conventions require treating casualties from both sides based on need alone. Doctors in war zones are legally required to be neutral. Bombing them is attacking neutrality itself. Now, the fine print, because there is one exception and it matters. A hospital loses its protection if it's used to commit acts harmful to the enemy, storing weapons, hosting fighters, becoming a firing position. But even then, the law doesn't say open fire. It requires a warning and reasonable time to comply before any attack, a legal cooling off period because the presumption of protection is that strong. Wounded patients don't stop being protected just because someone upstairs broke the rules. Here's the bleak scoreboard. The World Health Organization has documented hundreds of attacks on healthcare in conflict zones in single years. The most protected buildings in the laws of war are, in practice, some of the most frequently hit. The rule is crystal clear. The compliance is the war crime section of this video, which, spoiler, is why this video exists. Number 4. Taking hostages. Hostage taking is the war crime that doubles as a business model. Grab someone, a civilian, an aid worker, a soldier's family, and suddenly you have leverage. Trade them for prisoners, cash, safe passage, or political demands. It's coercion with a heartbeat attached, and it is completely, unambiguously illegal. Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions, the baseline rules that apply in every armed conflict, civil wars included, bans it outright. The Fourth Geneva Convention bans it again. The Rome Statute lists it as a war crime. There's even a dedicated treaty, the 1979 International Convention Against the Taking of Hostages, because the world decided this one deserved its own paperwork. What makes hostage-taking legally distinct from just detaining people? Intent. Armies can lawfully hold prisoners of war until hostilities end. That's detention with rules attached, food, medical care, Red Cross visits, the whole package. A hostage is different. Their captivity is conditional on someone else's behavior. Do what we say or they get hurt is the entire definition. The person becomes a bargaining chip, and international law has a firm policy on turning humans into currency. No. The historical version was even colder. Occupying armies in World War II would seize random civilians and announce that if any occupying soldier got attacked, hostages would be executed. Collective punishment with a schedule. The post-war tribunals and the 1949 Geneva Convention slammed that door shut permanently. Here's the rot at the center of it. Hostage-taking works exactly like human shields. It only pays off if the other side cares. The tactic is powered entirely by someone else's compassion, which the hostage-taker treats as a vulnerability to exploit. It's the strategy of someone who has run out of ways to win against soldiers and switched to winning against families. The law's response is refreshingly unsentimental. A human being is never a negotiating tool, and grief is not a legitimate weapon system. Number 3, starvation as a weapon. Sieges are as old as walls. Surround a city, cut the supply lines, wait. For most of history, this was just called strategy, and the people inside were called unfortunate. Modern international law finally called it what it is. Additional Protocol 1 of 1977 states that starvation of civilians as a method of warfare is prohibited, and the Rome Statute makes intentionally starving civilians a war crime, including willfully impeding relief supplies. In 2019, the ICC's member states even amended the statute to make sure this applies in civil wars too, which tells you how recently humanity got around to finishing this particular sentence. The rule has teeth in the details. It's not just don't withhold bread. Attacking, destroying, or rendering useless objects indispensable to civilian survival, food stocks, crops, livestock, drinking water installations, irrigation works, is specifically banned. Poison the wells, burn the fields, bomb the water treatment plant. Each one is its own violation. And blocking humanitarian aid convoys from reaching starving civilians isn't a bureaucratic delay. It's the crime itself, committed with a clipboard instead of a rifle. Starvation is uniquely vicious among weapons because of who it selects. A bullet hits whoever it hits. Famine works down a list. The youngest first, then the sick, then the old. The people least connected to the fighting die soonest, in reverse order of ability to do anything about it. It's a weapon that automatically aims itself at the weakest target available. Soldiers, meanwhile, the actual combatants, are the last to starve because armies feed themselves first. As a method of warfare that barely touches the war. And unlike most weapons, it's slow enough to watch. Starvation gives its victims weeks to understand exactly what's happening to them. The law's position is simple. Hunger is not ammunition, a city's children are not a pressure valve, and we just waited is not a defense. It's a confession with patience. Number 2, child soldiers. There's a specific kind of wrong that happens when war stops recruiting adults and starts consuming childhoods. Under the Rome Statute, conscripting or enlisting children under 15 into armed forces or groups, or using them to participate actively in hostilities, is a war crime. Additional protocols to the Geneva Conventions set the same floor, and the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child pushed the bar for compulsory recruitment and direct combat up to 18. Note the wording, conscripting or enlisting, meaning even if the child volunteers, the crime is complete. The law doesn't recognize a 12-year-old's signature on that particular contract for the same reason it doesn't let them sign mortgages. And participate actively is broader than holding a rifle. Tribunals have found that using kids as scouts, messengers, porters at the front line, or guards for military objectives counts too. The crime isn't just handing a child a weapon, it's plugging a child into the machinery of war at any combat-adjacent socket. Why do armed groups do it? The reasons are as practical as they are stomach-turning. Children are obedient, cheap, easily manipulated, and, the darkest part, easily replaced. Some groups deliberately force new recruits to commit atrocities against their own communities, burning the bridge home so the group becomes the only family left. That's not recruitment. That's manufacturing loyalty through trauma. This is also the war crime with the most famous conviction attached. The ICC's first ever verdict in 2012 was against Congolese warlord Thomas Lubanga, specifically and entirely for conscripting, enlisting, and using child soldiers. Of every crime on this countdown, the court's very first judgment drew the line here, because every other entry on this list destroys something in the present. This one reaches forward and destroys the part of a country that was supposed to be the future, and then hands it a gun and calls it a promotion. Number 1, targeting civilians. Everything else on this countdown is a footnote to this. The single load-bearing wall of the entire law of war is the principle of distinction. At all times, you must distinguish between combatants and civilians, and attacks may only be directed at military objectives. Additional Protocol 1 states it plainly. The civilian population as such, as well as individual civilians, shall not be the object of attack. The Rome Statute lists intentionally directing attacks against civilians as a war crime in both international and civil wars. The International Court of Justice has called distinction one of the cardinal, intransgressible principles of international humanitarian law, legal language for this one is not optional ever for anyone. Follow the thread and you'll notice nearly every crime we've covered is really this crime wearing a costume. Human shields, exploiting civilian protection, starvation, attacking civilians with time instead of shells, hospitals, civilians plus the wounded. Even Perfidy works by disguising fighters as civilians, which is exactly why it's banned. It erodes the one distinction keeping everyone else alive. And the law goes further than don't aim at them. Indiscriminate attacks, ones that don't or can't distinguish, like carpet bombing a city block to hit one radio tower, are prohibited. So are disproportionate attacks, where expected civilian harm is excessive compared to the concrete military advantage. Terror attacks, violence whose primary purpose is spreading fear among civilians, get their own explicit ban. The law even accepts the brutal honesty that civilians will die in wars. What it refuses to accept is civilians dying as the plan. Here's why this sits at number 1. Strip away the treaties, the Latin, the acronyms, and the entire law of war is one sentence. The fight is between the fighters. Deliberately targeting civilians doesn't break a rule of war. It breaks the reason the rules exist. It's the difference between a war and a massacre with logistics. Every convention since 1864 has essentially been humanity writing, in progressively larger letters, they are not the target. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them. End.